Rebecca Lawson appeared to be a devoted wife, while Daniel Lawson was the successful businessman who adored her. But behind the polished image of their marriage, investigators uncovered a web of lies, an illicit affair, and a shocking plan that turned a romantic yacht trip into a calculated act of murder. Daniel Lawson was a man admired by many. In his mid-40s, he had built a fortune through years of relentless work in real estate, transforming small investments into an empire of properties scattered across Florida. His life was filled with success stories, expensive cars in his driveway, a sprawling coastal home, most notably a sleek white yacht he named Endless Horizon. For him, the yacht was not just a luxury, but a symbol of how far he had come from his modest beginnings. It was on this very vessel that he often sought relaxation and escape from the pressures of business. Rebecca, his wife of 7 years, was a striking woman in her early 30s. She had grown accustomed to a life of luxury, always appearing at charity galas in glittering gowns or sharing sun-drenched vacation photos online. To outsiders, she seemed the perfect partner to Daniel's ambition. A couple who fit seamlessly into the image of wealth and success, yet behind closed doors, their relationship was far from perfect. Daniel's long hours at work and constant worry over finances created a growing distance. Rebecca, younger and restless, began to resent the time and energy her husband devoted to his empire instead of to her. What had once felt like a fairy tale now seemed like a cage she could not escape. Despite the tension, the couple often showcased their love publicly. Social media displayed moments of them clinking champagne glasses on deck, smiling for the camera under golden sunsets. These images gave the illusion of happiness, convincing friends and acquaintances that their bond was as strong as ever. But beneath the carefully staged photos, cracks were widening. Rebecca had grown dissatisfied, and Daniel, though aware of her frustrations, tried to patch the relationship with gifts and extravagant trips. The upcoming yacht voyage was one such attempt, a weekend getaway meant to rekindle their romance. That weekend, the sea was calm and inviting, the sun casting a warm glow over the horizon. The couple boarded the yacht with provisions for days of sailing, planning to enjoy the privacy of the open water. To anyone watching them depart, the sight was picturesque. A powerful man and his beautiful wife setting off on an adventure together. Yet neither knew that the trip would end in tragedy, one that would unravel everything they had built. As the yacht glided over the water, Rebecca appeared cheerful, sipping cocktails and lounging under the sun, while Daniel busied himself with the sails and navigation. To him, the trip was a chance to remind his wife of the life he had worked so hard to provide. To her, it was another performance, a role she played for the benefit of appearances. The growing resentment, the arguments behind closed doors, and the secrets she carried weighed heavily on the journey. What no one could have predicted was that within days, this seemingly idyllic voyage would transform into one of the most shocking cases investigators had ever faced. The Lawson marriage, once admired by so many, was about to be exposed for what it truly was. A fragile facade, hiding betrayal, greed, and a deadly plan that would forever change the story of Endless Horizon. Rebecca's call to the Coast Guard came just after sunset, her voice trembling as she explained that her husband had fallen overboard. She claimed Daniel had been adjusting a sail when he lost his footing and disappeared into the dark waters. She said she had tried to save him, throwing a life preserver and calling his name. The waves swallowed him quickly, leaving nothing but silence. The distress in her voice sounded genuine, and the report was taken seriously. Within minutes, rescue boats and helicopters were dispatched to the area where the yacht had last been tracked. When the Coast Guard arrived, they found Rebecca alone on the deck, her makeup smeared, her hands shaking as though she had been crying. She repeated her story, insisting it had all happened so fast she had no time to react. Searchlights swept across the water while divers plunged into the sea, combing every direction for signs of Daniel. The search lasted through the night, but the ocean revealed nothing. By dawn, the effort shifted from rescue to recovery, though still no trace of Daniel's body surfaced. Authorities labeled it an unfortunate accident, one of many tragedies that occur at sea. News of the incident spread quickly. Friends and colleagues of Daniel were shocked, their messages of sympathy flooding Rebecca's phone. She appeared devastated in public, leaning on friends for support, attending memorials and speaking softly about the man she had lost. To outsiders, She seemed like a grieving widow crushed by misfortune. Yet from the very beginning, certain details of her account did not sit right with investigators. One officer noticed that Rebecca hesitated when asked to describe the exact moment Daniel went overboard. She said he had been wearing light clothing, but a witness who had seen them depart earlier recalled him in a heavy jacket, unusual attire for adjusting sails on a warm evening. Another inconsistency came with the timing of her distress call. According to logs, she waited nearly 10 minutes after Daniel supposedly fell before contacting authorities. When asked about the delay, she explained she had panicked and hoped he might resurface. But investigators quietly noted that her explanation did not align with the urgency one might expect. As they examined the yacht more closely, questions continued to form. There was no evidence of ropes out of place or sails in need of adjusting, contradicting her claim of why Daniel had been on deck in the first place. Even more curious was her calm behavior during certain parts of questioning. While she appeared distraught in public, at times she grew oddly composed, answering difficult questions with a steadiness that seemed at odds with the tragedy she described. Still, without Daniel's body, no proof of foul play existed, and investigators were careful not to accuse without evidence. The official stance remained that it was a boating accident. But whispers of doubt spread quietly within the team. What Rebecca had described could have been an accident, yet the gaps in her story left an uncomfortable feeling that something darker lurked beneath the surface. The case that began as a tragedy at sea was already beginning to look far more complicated, and the seeds of suspicion were planted in the minds of those determined to uncover the truth. As days turned into weeks without Daniel's body being found, investigators felt a growing unease about Rebecca's version of events. On the surface, it was a tragic boating accident, yet the inconsistencies they had quietly noted continued to gnaw at them. They decided to revisit the case with sharper eyes, focusing not only on the night Daniel vanished, but also on the days leading up to the trip. What emerged was a picture of a marriage more fractured than anyone had realized. Financial records revealed that Daniel had recently updated his will, naming Rebecca as the sole beneficiary of his estate. The change had been made just a week before their yacht trip, removing his sister and longtime business partner, who had previously been included. Investigators found it peculiar that such a significant decision had occurred so close to his disappearance. The adjustment meant Rebecca stood to inherit millions should anything happen to him. The discovery shifted the lens through which detectives viewed the case. It was no longer simply about an accident, it was about motive. Friends and colleagues began sharing stories of Daniel's growing unease at home. Some recalled him mentioning heated arguments with Rebecca, often about money. Others remembered him confiding suspicions of her being unfaithful. These conversations painted a darker backdrop to the glamorous public image the Lawsons had cultivated. The once-envied couple was not as perfect as they seemed. Their marriage was fragile, strained by distrust and resentment. Investigators returned to the yacht for a more thorough forensic examination. What they uncovered deepened their suspicions. On the deck, near the railing where Rebecca claimed Daniel had fallen, technicians found faint traces of blood. Though the area had been scrubbed clean, luminol testing revealed patterns consistent with blunt force trauma. Evidence suggested a violent altercation might have occurred before Daniel went overboard. This finding clashed entirely with Rebecca's account of a sudden accident. Meanwhile, the timeline of events began to unravel further. GPS data from the yacht indicated a strange pause in movement on the night of the incident, lasting nearly 20 minutes before Rebecca made the distress call. Investigators theorized that this window could have been the time she used to clean the deck and compose her story before alerting authorities. The delay suddenly seemed less like panic and more like calculation. As detectives pieced together these fragments, Rebecca's image of the grieving widow grew harder to believe. Her interviews with investigators became strained, her answers sometimes contradicting earlier statements. When pressed about the will, she claimed Daniel had insisted on the changes, but offered no explanation for the timing. Her insistence on avoiding further questioning only added to suspicions. The case was no longer viewed as a simple tragedy. The altered will, the marital disputes, the blood evidence, and the suspicious delay in calling for help all pointed toward foul play. Yet without Daniel's body, the investigation remained stuck in limbo. Investigators knew that proving murder without a corpse would be nearly impossible, but the cracks in Rebecca's story were widening. The image of a loving wife who had lost her husband to the sea was slowly being replaced with that of a woman who might have. orchestrated his disappearance for wealth and freedom. As investigators dug deeper into Rebecca's life, they uncovered a thread that unraveled into a far more sinister picture than they had first imagined. Phone records revealed a pattern of late-night calls and text messages exchanged with a man who was not her husband. At first, the identity of this man was unclear, but soon detectives traced the number back to a yacht instructor named Alex Turner. He was younger, charming, and worked at a local marina that the Lawsons often frequented. The discovery of their connection shifted the investigation from suspicion to something more concrete. Witnesses were quick to fill in the blanks. Staff at the marina remembered seeing Rebecca and Alex together, their interactions more intimate than professional. A neighbor recalled spotting Rebecca's car parked outside his small apartment on multiple nights when Daniel was away on business trips. Friends of Rebecca, when questioned, admitted she had confided in them about her unhappiness in the marriage and her growing attraction to someone else. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to align into a chilling picture of motive. The financial records added yet another layer. Days before the yacht trip, Rebecca had transferred a large sum of money to Alex. Investigators suspected this was either a payment to keep him quiet or part of a plan to secure a new life. Together, once Daniel was out of the way, the combination of the altered will and the hidden affair now provided a compelling motive. Rebecca wanted Daniel's wealth, but not Daniel himself. By removing him, she could inherit his fortune and pursue her relationship with Alex without the burden of divorce or scandal. Confronted with the evidence, Rebecca continued to deny the affair, insisting Alex was only a friend. But detectives had the phone logs, the financial transfers, and the testimony of witnesses to contradict her. The picture they presented to the prosecution was one of premeditation. Daniel's accident at sea was beginning to look less like a tragic misstep and more like a carefully staged murder. Investigators also discovered that Rebecca and Alex had exchanged messages in the days before the trip, including one cryptic note where she wrote, "It will all be over soon." Though vague, the message carried a heavy implication in light of what followed. The timing of those communications was damning, coinciding precisely with the final hours of Daniel's life. As the affair became public knowledge, Rebecca's image of a grieving widow began to collapse. The media seized on the scandal, reporting the salacious details of her double life. To the community, the glamorous wife who once seemed to have it all was now painted as a manipulative woman driven by greed and passion. What had begun as whispers of suspicion had become a storm of accusation, and investigators were now convinced that the so-called accident was, in fact, murder. Still, one obstacle remained. Without Daniel's body, it was difficult to prove beyond doubt that a crime had been committed. The prosecution could build a case on circumstantial evidence, but a jury might hesitate without physical proof of foul play. For Rebecca, this gap in the investigation was her last shield, one she clung to as the pressure closed in. Yet that shield would not hold forever, because the ocean had not kept its secret as well as she had hoped. Months after Daniel Lawson's disappearance, the ocean finally gave up its secret. Fishermen working off the Florida coast hauled in a net heavy with debris, only to discover human remains tangled within it. The discovery was immediately reported, and within days, DNA confirmed what investigators had long suspected. The body belonged to Daniel. The confirmation transformed the case from speculation into certainty. Now, with a body to examine, the truth could no longer be disguised as an accident. The autopsy revealed details that shattered Rebecca's carefully constructed story. Daniel's skull showed signs of blunt force trauma, the kind consistent with being struck by a heavy object. Bruising on his arm suggested he had tried to defend himself before the fatal blow. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide, explaining that the injuries were not consistent with a fall from a yacht. This was no tragic misstep in the night Daniel had been attacked, incapacitated, and then thrown into the water. The chilling truth investigators had suspected from the beginning was now undeniable. Rebecca was arrested at her home in the early morning hours, her hands cuffed as neighbors watched in disbelief. The glamorous widow who had once been showered with sympathy was now accused of orchestrating her husband's murder. When confronted with the forensic evidence, she remained calm but silent, refusing to admit guilt. The weight of the case, however, left little room for doubt. Prosecutors prepared a narrative that was as compelling as it was damning. In court, the evidence came together piece by piece. Jurors heard about the altered will that placed Rebecca at the center of Daniel's fortune, the secret affair with Alex Turner, and the suspicious financial transfers made just days before the trip. Phone records laid out a trail of late-night communications, culminating in the cryptic message hinting at an imminent change. Forensic experts testified about the traces of blood on the yacht and the delay in Rebecca's emergency call, painting a picture of a staged accident. The autopsy findings tied it all together, proving that Daniel had not fallen, but had been struck and disposed of with chilling precision. The defense attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that the affair did not equal murder, and that the blood traces could have come from something unrelated. But the combination of motive, opportunity, and forensic proof was overwhelming. Jurors listened as the prosecution described Rebecca's plan: eliminate her husband, secure his fortune, and begin a new life with her lover. The story was clear, calculated, and impossible to ignore. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Guilty of first-degree murder. Rebecca showed little emotion as the sentence was delivered: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The woman, who had once stood on the deck of endless horizon, as the picture of wealth and success, was now reduced to a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. The case left an indelible mark on the community and the world of true crime. What began as a call for help from a grieving wife had unraveled into one of the most chilling examples of calculated deception. Daniel Lawson's death was not an accident lost to the sea, but a reminder of how appearances can mask the darkest truths. Behind the glossy surface of a perfect life lay secrets that ended in violence. A haunting story investigators would never forget.